Hello, I'm Beverly Childs, Executive Director of the Anderson County Museum. Through November the 21st, we are hosting a pop-up exhibit from the National Archives entitled Rightfully Hers. This exhibit commemorates the 100th anniversary of the ratification of the 19th Amendment, women's voting rights before and after the 19th, and its impact on today. I have voted in every presidential election since I was 18 years of age. When we lived in a larger city, you would have to stand in line for hours just to vote. I remember one time I stood in the pouring rain, and as it was raining, I saw women leaving the line because they no longer wanted to stand in line in the rain to vote. That made me very sad, because voting is such a privilege and everyone should take the time to go out and vote their choice. Yes, I got very wet that day, but I was so proud that I stood there for the 4 hours it took for me to vote for the next president of the United States of America. Recently, I invited some women in the community to drop by and see the exhibit and talk about voting. I hope you enjoy hearing their stories.
Hi, I'm Carol Burdette. I'm the former mayor of Pendleton, South Carolina, in Anderson County.
Hello, I'm Elizabeth Strong. I am the current chairwoman of the Anderson County Human Relations Council, and I'm just thrilled to be able to share this information with you guys, the importance of voting.
I'm Katy Smith. I'm the Executive Director for the Voter Registration and Elections Office.
Hey everybody, I'm Beth Batson. I'm excited to be here to tell you a little story about why I love voting on behalf of the Anderson County Museum.
My name is Sara Crocker, and I am a native of Anderson, South Carolina, born, raised, and currently living in Anderson, a former Anderson County Museum employee, and currently a senior lecturer in communication at Clemson University.
I'm Kathryn Smith, and I grew up in Clemson, South Carolina.
Hello, my name is Angel Wheeler. I am the founder of a nonprofit organization here in Anderson called Angels Elite Model Troop, and our whole basis and premises is to instill self-esteem and confidence in the young ladies that we mentor, so that they know that whatever they decide to do, whatever they choose to do, they have the confidence behind them to do that.
So when I was invited to reflect upon my experience as a female voter, I, of course, remembered my first presidential election, which was in 2004.
I was 18, a senior in high school, and there was a voter registration going on at the high school. So I decided this is a great time for me to register to vote. I don't think I've ever missed an opportunity since then to cast my ballot.
The first time that I ever voted, I was 18 years old. Was registered and got to vote at a little polling location on punch cards.
I remember my first time voting while in college at Benedict College in Columbia, South Carolina. It was a scary time because there were a lot of people that did not want us to vote, and we stood our ground and we were able to vote.
South Carolina did not ratify the 19th Amendment until 1969. The last state that could possibly support ratification was Tennessee. Now, this was after 8 states, including 7 in the South, had voted it down. But Tennessee was pretty equally divided. And in the end, it came down to one legislator, a young man named Harry Byrne. He was the youngest member of the legislature. He got a letter from his mother urging him to be a good boy and vote for ratification. And that's what swung it, that one vote, and it became law in August 1920.
But I ran for town council. It was 1987, and I was running against someone who had served back in the 1970s, a very popular man in Pendleton. Never imagined that I would win. But I did, but it was only by 5 votes. It reassured me that day that every vote does count.
Over the years, one of the interesting things that I found when I first came to work at the elections office was learning how the women took on the gentleman's name when they registered to vote. Going from say mine would have been Mrs. Charles Smith on the voter registration rolls as my registered name, to now having me be Katy Smith and having my own identity going in to vote as a woman.
But really, only in the last 10 years, when I've been doing a lot of research for my biographies on women in American history, have I learned the full extent of that battle, that war, that women were ostracized, humiliated, beaten by the police, arrested, sent to prison.
This week, as I've been part of planning to celebrate the 100th anniversary of women's right to vote, I had a discussion with my mother yesterday, who's in her 90s. And she told me, and I never knew this, she told me that in her 20s, before I was born, she was president of the League of Women Voters in her city. So it must be in my DNA.
It is so important for us to take the responsibility to vote at every opportunity, because the women leading up to this 100th anniversary 100 years ago spent so much of what they had to ensure women would have the right to vote.
So we've gone from punch card to electronic voting, and now we're back to a system where we've blended that with the technology and the voting now. So it hasn't been that far, even from when the ratification of the 19th Amendment happened, that we've even changed over the years. And, you know, coming into it in 2000, and now here we are in 2020, and still seeing that we are having some of those ladies that are much older, that are seasoned, still have their husband's name as their registered name. And then to expand on that was going into the voting booth. We actually had to have legislation that says only one person can be in that voting booth, because the spouse of the woman, the husband, would go into the voting booth. So she goes in, she signs her registered name, goes to vote, and is in that voting booth by herself. So that's just a little bit of the experience I've seen in this century, in this where we are now, and how much it had to even change further for women and the right to vote.
As a child growing up, my father was very intentional about talking to me about politics, teaching me how to consume news and how to interpret news, also taking me around to a lot of political events and letting me get a feel for what a candidate does and how a candidate should act for his or her constituents. I also began to think about the women in my family, beginning with my great-grandmother, Iris Ballou, also a native of Anderson, who was born in 1909. And I, of course, called her Nanny. And Nanny could not vote, obviously, when, or women didn't have the vote when Nanny was born, but by the time Nanny was an adult, she could vote and did. So then I began to think about my grandmother, who took a different path than her mother. My grandmother chose not to vote, and it wasn't until 1980 when she experienced divorce and became a single woman navigating the world alone that she realized that there are policies and procedures that affected her, and she needed to put in her 2 cents.
And so I think it's so important, because we as women have not always had the right to vote. But now that we do, I hope that we all take advantage. We have a voice, we have something to say. So everyone, please, on November 3rd, make sure you go out and vote.
I love to vote so much. My husband and I have a tradition that we go to vote together in every election. Can't remember missing one since I was 18. And I put on my red, white, and blue. And on the way to the polls, I hum a Sousa march. Yes, I do. I get so excited about getting to vote. And red, white, and blue and Sousa marches, that's never been associated with a particular political party to me. That's just American.
I have not always won, but I can tell you that voting for your representative, the person that you want to speak for you, is so important.
My mother has always voted. As long as I can remember, my mother and father both encouraged me to vote. It was just an expectation.
And I never want to let an opportunity go that I don't cast my vote for the candidate that I want to represent me.
I encourage women to use your God-given right to vote. Use your voice, use your passion, because we're the ones that are really changing the world with the connection with the men, but women, we really can make a difference. So vote.
So as an educator now, I impress upon both my male and female students to be able to vote, and I am thankful that I live in a country where I have always been able to vote.
So thanks for this opportunity. Treasure your right to vote.
Thanks for joining us today. Please check out our website and social media pages for more information on the Anderson County Museum.